All right, the road to Visual Studio 2027. Did you know that we were going to have a Visual Studio 2027? No? Well, I guess Jim let that cat out of the bag. AI, right? Everywhere, all the time. And, you know, we're all in our different places in that journey. Like, it all means something different to all of us. Like our companies, our passions, our skills, like what we want to do, like have us on different usages of Copilot from almost nothing and all the way up to using it all day, every day, right? And that's totally fine. However, it can be a little bit overwhelming because things are moving so fast all the time right now that, you know, we're talking about like new acronyms and new names of things that we are supposed to pay attention to, and then 2 months later they're gone, to never be heard of again, because they came and went and something else took over. And I don't know about you, but for me it's like hard to keep up, and it's almost like hair pulling sometimes, what to focus on, what not to focus on. How much anxiety should I have for not doing the CLI thing? Everybody's doing CLI, but I'm a visual person, I like coding, you know, and stuff. So am I supposed to be worried or feel anxiety or feeling job security issues? Or like, there's a lot of stuff going on, right? In this whole, like in our brains and in the world and everything around us. And it can be a little bit hard to keep up with everything. It just moves so fast. Remember prompt engineering, the term? Oh, we're going to be prompt engineers now, like a year ago, right? Prompt engineering, that's the new hotness. When is the last time you heard anyone say prompt engineering? Like, pff, it just went away. It came, it was the new hot thing, and now it's gone. This is something I hear people say on social media quite a lot. I don't write code anymore. When is the last time you wrote code? Right? Because we don't have to write code anymore. The agent is writing code for us. Not only does the agent write the code, we manage multiple agents. It's awesome. I don't have to worry about code anymore. Is that reality for most people in here? I don't think so. I don't think so. But if you follow social media, if you look at Twitter, if you look at other places, you get this sense that for the people that are on the cutting edge, that really make a huge difference, that is like, you know, 10xing their own productivity or 100xing it, or that's what they're doing. The future is now. It's agentic. It's amazing. And we get to live in this kind of cyberpunk world, Minority Report, where we're conducting all our agents. Right? We always have something running. We have multiple agents running at the same time who can run sub-agents, and they run on a loop. We've heard a new term called Ralph loop, whatever that might be, right? It loops and it does things, and we're sitting there and managing everything, Minority Report, okay, do that. And it can be a little bit stressful, because I think Hanselman was saying he always feels guilty if he doesn't have an agent running doing something. So that's one side of it. Well, we can think about another side of it, which could be, hey, I now have all these tools. I can now exist at a higher level, at a higher altitude, right? And I can have these agents, which means I cannot work as much as I'm used to. I can sit on the beach, check in on my agents every now and again, and then jump in the water, you know, come back an hour later, check up on my agents, steer them in a different direction. I'm not sure this is how the world is going, though. This is not my sense, but ideally, I could see that could be very attractive, right? But the reality is probably that all of us, myself included, we're sitting in front of our screens, and we're using Visual Studio or some tool to run our debugging, write our code, even if we're also using agents, or even if we're using AI for something in our work, right? No matter where we are on the spectrum of no AI, maximum AI, right? This is probably what our daily life looks like. It is not on the beach, right? And it's not in the cyberpunk world. But you kind of get that sense that that is where everyone is moving. We're also over-indexing on some people that are maybe loud on social media, takes up a lot of space, and it creates some anxiety. But the reality is also that maybe I have a company policy that prevents me from using these things that I hear about all the time. So now it's not even my choice if I want to do all this new fancy stuff that the world seems to be talking about all the time. I'm not allowed to because security or governance or privacy or some sort of policy that's put on me. Does that mean I'm falling behind? Does that mean I'm missing out? Does that mean I'm a dinosaur? Am I going extinct? There's also this other aspect. Do you have time to keep up with it all? Like, we go to work, we come home, we have life after work, we have plans on the weekends, we got kids, we got sports, we got whatever it is, right? How much time are you actually going to invest outside work learning about all this AI stuff that changes faster than you can keep up anyway? And this again perpetuates that feeling of urgency. Like you know there's something here that seems urgent. You have to get on this bandwagon somehow, but you don't have the time and you're not allowed to do it at work. And company policy prevents you. And guess what? Maybe you don't even want this future. Who asked you? Were you asked? Hey, do you want not to code anymore? This passion thing that you've been developing over 40 years? You want to throw it away and just orchestrate agents? Maybe not. No? Because you love what you do and who you are. And you might be a developer and it's part of your identity and you are a coder. No one's going to take that away from you, right? This is the reality of today. Whether we're using AI and to what extent we're using AI, we're sitting in front of our screen and we're doing our job and we're managing our software, our mission critical, highly unit tested, of course, applications. And we're having a good time. And guess what? You're the 99%. We all do this. But that doesn't mean we're not dipping our toes, at least in AI. We don't have to jump all the way in and start swimming immediately. We have to learn to swim. But start dipping your toes, get your feet wet. I don't know what happened to his other leg. So we're at a point now where at least we should look at it. But we don't need to panic. Good news is, it seems that your skills are now more important than they ever were. Because the agents can write code, but they don't know all the stuff you do. They're not great at debugging. They can't find all the issues. They don't know how your system fits in the larger scheme of your organization or the world or topology, infrastructure, and so on. They don't know what you've just been talking to other people about in a meeting about where you're going to go in the future, what direction you're going. It doesn't know those things, so there's just so many limitations to what it can do. It's super useful for a bunch of things, and then not for others. And the better we are at debugging, the more we understand our systems, the better we are our coding and so on, the more we can steer, the more we can control, and the better we can create the outcome. What you're doing today is a little bit a mix of these three things. So the why. Why are we building software? What is the feature we're building? Why is that? Well, because there's a customer need or there's a business goal. That is why we do it. This is the problem space. Okay, so this is maybe where your product managers spend most of their time on the why. The what might be where you have your architects and your UX designers. That's the solution space. Okay, we have a problem now. What's the solution? How do we do that? How do we architect and design these things? And finally, we have the implementation. We got to code things, right? We got to make it happen. Got to write some stuff. And there are processes around this, how we do DevOps, CI, CD, and all these different activities that go along the implementation space. So that's kind of a traditional way of looking at this. And we all fit into these buckets differently. Some might be really into the what. Like if you're an architect or a UX designer, this might be your main focus, and you still have some focus on the why and a little bit on the how, right? But it's a shrunken how. You're not writing that much code, maybe, as an architect. It could also be that you are a coder, and that is your main skill, and that's what you're doing and want to be doing, and so the how is bigger for you, and the why is really small. Let the PM deal with the customer, please. I'll do my coding. Or you have something like this, where it's a mix, a little bit of mix. You have the why and the what. This could be a technical PM, for instance. Or if you're not a technical PM, it might look a little bit like this. And it's all cool. It stands to reason that the problem space stays pretty much the same when we're dealing with AI. We still have customer needs and we still have business goals. So the same problems exist. It might be different types of problems, but it's problems that we have to discover, find out, and fall in love with the problem, not the solution, of course. We fall in love with the problem, we figure out what's going on, we do all the activities we normally do so that we can land on a what. And this might now change quite a bit because stuff like specs are more like, how do we define things? Maybe instead of writing some sort of Word document, maybe we write in Markdown, things that agents can understand. So our processes might change a bit. We might even use agents to orchestrate some of this definition and some of this planning. And we can think about integration as well. Like, how does our system fit into others? The thing that happens is that the elevation goes up, our altitude goes up. We can be at a higher place. The AI allows us to kind of be hands-off on certain things, and we can go up in altitude. And we can look at the problem from a higher point of view, which means we can see further. So we can see to partner teams, to other parts of our system, and figure out, hey, can we integrate over here to solve a problem for you as well as for us? We had a designer at Microsoft some years ago. He did like an internal talk over in developer division, and he said that every single feature you build, this is back when I was on the .NET team, and he said every single feature you build should also benefit or solve a problem for a partner team. Rule of thumb, every single feature. And if it doesn't, back to the drawing board, figure out a way that it solves problems bigger than just for you. That is now a thing that's easier because we can go up in altitude. And then finally, the how. Well, we're still going to be coding. That doesn't seem to go away, but the amount of code and the type of coding might change a bit. We're going to have a lot more reviewing. We're going to read more code, have more reviews. If you have agents writing some of your code, you're going to have to accept it or reject it, right? Or iterate with it. So the whole review thing, like relatively speaking, you're going to spend more time reading and reviewing code than you are today. Same goes for building and running, because how do you verify that something that came in from an agent actually works and feels right? That feature you defined in Markdown, or your architect or whatever defined, does it feel right when it's produced by an AI? Or a human for that matter. Someone has to figure out whether does it feel right? Does it feel natural in my application and so on? That's very much a human job still. And then we verify and we iterate. And so those are changes. And again, we go up in altitude. To do all these different things, we still need our beloved IDE, or editor of choice. We still need to have access to our code. We still need to see what's going on, whether we write the code or someone else does. We still need to have an agent to talk to and to help and to iterate and speed us up. And we definitely need a good testing infrastructure and good tooling for testing. Testing is the one thing that's might be one of the most important things in the very near future, because that's your guardrail against having to review all this code, all these PRs that all of a sudden come in. If they don't break a unit test or an integration test, it's much easier for you to reason about the quality and so on of that PR. So unit testing and integration tests are going to be more and more important. They were important always, but they're going to grow in importance. And of course, finally, you still need a great editor. You still need to have a great experience both reading and writing code, and debugging, and profiling, and all these things. We still have, debugging is actually a really hard thing for an AI to deal with, because it requires the runtime under the right conditions and so on. And yeah, for a website, it's one thing. For a desktop app, it's a different thing. And for multi-microservice architecture app and all that, it's okay, good luck, right? And Visual Studio has some really interesting things when it comes to debugging and profiling. And I wanna let Virtual Nick tell you about it. He couldn't be here, as Jim said, but instead he went home from the airport and he recorded what he was gonna show you live. So we're gonna hear his voice too. So let's see what Nick has to say.
Hey folks, today I'm super excited to share some of the new features we've been working on in Visual Studio, specifically a feature around helping you improve the performance of your code. And so to do that, I wanted to show you this feature working on some real code that I grabbed from NuGet.org. So searching through some of the packages there, trying to see if I could find one that would be kind of cool for a demo, and I found this QR coder library. It seems to be a pretty popular library. It has almost 60 million downloads, and it basically helps you render QR codes in your .NET applications. And so I went ahead and I cloned it in Visual Studio, and you can see I've got my project, I've got some benchmarks, a console, test app, bunch of different things. And I want to go ahead and I want to see if I can make a improvement to their code. And so I could run this under the profiler, kind of doing existing profiling workflows, but I don't really have time for that in this demo today. And so I want to click the easy button. And so for that, we've gone ahead and we've added some new entry points into the profiler in the Test Explorer. And so now on newer versions of Visual Studio, all SKUs can profile different unit tests. So if you have like an integration test, this is a great way to get into the profiler, get actual performance data out of it, make changes, and kind of see the impact of those changes that you're making. But what's even cooler is we now have this profile with Copilot button. And what this does is this tells Copilot to go ahead and run the test under the profiler, try and make changes to the code that it's testing, and then try and implement some optimizations and measure the impact of that. And so you can see it says it's identifying the scope. It went ahead and it ran the profile here to establish a baseline, and then it can start digging into that trace that I captured. And so you can see it said it sees the key findings, should match approved image. This is test framework code, making sure that it actually kind of asserts and matches what it should be expected. It says can't be optimized here because it tries to ignore any test framework code. But then almost half the time is spent on the QR code generation, which is good. That's something that'll be a good target for optimizations. And then it says a moderate contributor is the draw scan lines for the actual image rendering. And so you can see it says it's the generate QR code is definitely the thing to try and implement. It's going to go ahead and implement an optimization. So it found specifically where it should try and implement. It found some of the functions that it should be looking at. It's digging up and down the stack trace that's in the profiling trace that it captured, and it can see where things are actually being called and what is happening. And so now it says, now it has a comprehensive view of the hot path. What are the key optimization opportunities? There's this mask code module placer. It calls these things multiple times. Because the fact that it used an instrumentation profiler in this case, it gets actual call counts. And so it can see like if you've called things multiple times, and it can optimize that by just making the call once and hanging on to the result. It found a point where we use floating point math, which is slower, and it thinks it can use integer division. And then it found another spot where it looks like we're doing some indexing into a module, a 2D array matrix, and then it can now cache the row reference. And so it's reading the code, it's going ahead and it's doing the optimizations. It went ahead and it actually is kind of getting ahead of us a little bit. It is gone ahead and it's done the optimizations. You can see it made changes. It tried to do the build, and it looks like it was doing method impl options, aggressive inlining. My guess is it was trying to inline a function call, and then it's seeing that the namespace isn't there, so it's going ahead and it's going to correct that. And then with any luck, the build will now pass, and then it is going to go ahead and it'll rerun that unit test, and then it'll see the impact of the change that it made. So our build is successful, which is awesome. It's now running the test to verify correctness. That's one of the benefits of using tests to go ahead and profile, is it knows that the test will actually test for for functional correctness. And so as it makes changes, it can make sure that the it's not breaking the functionality of it, and then it can make sure that it is actually faster. And so it said there was a failure on .NET Framework only, and that's regarding source information, but it works on .NET 5. And so it's gone ahead and it reprofiled it and made the changes. And you can see it then lists off all the different changes it made. It looks like the create QR code is faster. Place modules, which previously was in our top functions, is no longer listed. That makes sense if it was probably inlining it. And then it was making some additional changes. And then that pattern 5, where it switched from float arithmetic with a floor down to integer math, it should have improved that there. And so now the self percent dropped by approximately 63%, reflecting, that it has in fact improved the code. And so I can go ahead and I can look at the code and I can see like, oh, it went from obviously floating point math down to integer math. Maybe that's faster. Maybe I don't know why. And the nice part is when Copilot is doing these optimizations, I can follow it up with my own questions. And I can say, why is the integer math faster than the floating point math? And then not only will Copilot go and try and optimize my code, it'll actually teach me along the way, like, hey, this is why this is faster. And so talks about floating point unit versus ALU pipeline. It says that math.floor is far more work than just, right shifting by 1. And then the floor is redundant. And then the cost of this is compounded. And so it looks like it's doing it for every cell of the QR code. So it's a 29 by 29 grid. So there's over 6,000 calls to it. So even a little bit of optimization where you're optimizing, very small amounts of floating point to integer can actually have a pretty big impact. And with that, we could continue to click on buttons here and continue to follow up on more and more things and have Copilot optimize stuff for us. But it really goes to show, like, a couple of minutes here, I've been clicking on some buttons. I launched into a performance investigation. Copilot helped me find and identify things that we could change that actually have a positive impact on the code. And then it made those changes, validated them for me, and then taught me something along the way. And so with that, thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy your time at the conference.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Virtual Nick. That's absolutely amazing, because what it gives us is, first of all, a new way of profiling to find slowdowns in our code, like expensive lines of code. By having unit tests already, we can simply right-click and say, profile this unit test. And that's without using any AI. So we can't all use AI, right? For whatever reason. So you still can go from a unit test to find out what is the slow paths that it's testing, so that you can optimize it. With the AI on top of it, you can actually then learn about, like, well, okay, how can you then optimize it? So that's the gap that the AI fills. We have the tooling to unblock us, but we might need the skills to actually do something about it. And so that's where AI comes in. So this partnership of, you have your tool, you have Visual Studio on one side that helps and guides you and do all these things. When we sprinkle in AI in strategic places, we can really do things and unlock potential that was not realizable before. So this is one of the features I'm super excited about. And as Jim was mentioning, this is one of the most beloved features is the profiler agent. And it's getting better. So whether you do benchmarks, whether you do unit testing, you can connect the profiler to that and improve the performance of your app, any app. And as I was mentioning in my morning session, I think optimizing performance is one of the things that, I don't think anyone has ever gotten fired for optimizing their performance without asking permission first, right? So it's like one of those things we can safely go home and play around with and see what we can get out of it. You'll be surprised. we have this space where AI is coming in. We're on different locations on that spectrum of where we are when it comes to AI. So, but no matter where you are, what are sort of the things that we're looking into and where we think are good places to get started and prepare your code and your team for this new world? So one of them is unit testing. We touched on this a little bit, right? Having a super strong test harness. So unit testing is key. If you can add acceptance tests, integration tests, functional tests, whatever you want to call it, do that too. So this is actually an exercise we're going through in Visual Studio itself right now, on Visual Studio itself. So we've always had pretty darn good tests, both functional and unit tests. But it turns out if we want to let an agent loose and say, hey, go fix the paper cuts that users have reported that they want fixed, we need more testing. And so we're in the process right now to get us ready to be able to really take full advantage of the agents. And so you can imagine a code base like Visual Studio. We don't really know how many lines of code there's in Visual Studio. We estimate, and by estimate I do mean we guess, about 200 million lines of code. You can imagine this is not a small thing to go through. Luckily, you won't have as big a task as we do in this space, but it's important. So this is one thing we can start with right now. And if you don't have unit tests or you have very limited, the agent is actually really helpful in starting you to write unit tests and add tests to projects and so on. But it requires human eyes because you need to come in and figure out whether or not you're testing the right thing or not. So it's very much still your human skill is required on this step. Here's another one. Get your backlog in order. Jim was also mentioning this a little bit. You know, oftentimes we hear from people when we talk about backlogs, you know, oh, the PMs are dealing with the backlog, and I'm only looking at the top 20 anyway, right? I don't have time to look at the long tail of, you know, whatever the PM or the manager says that he wants us to do. It's like it's down on like, it's like in priority, it's below the cut line anyway, so I don't even look that far down. But if you have an army of skilled developers, it's kind of dumb, but at least they're eager to do something that you tell them to do, namely agents, they can start working off of your backlog if the conditions are right. But it requires that your backlog is in an actionable state. Right? If you just have a bunch of like items where it's just a title, the button should be green. Well, what about the hover state? What about an error state? And what, you know, make it more actionable to humans and AI alike. Go through and start looking at that and get your backlogs in order. And you'll have a whole bunch of things for the AI to start working on, which is the next step. So now you have the tests and you have a backlog, right? So you have the test, you have the guardrails in place to an extent, and now you have a backlog of things for the agent to look at. Those are the kind of the two prerequisites here. And you can now start assigning work to the agent. And then we have to verify that it all works. We have to build it, we have to run it, we have to verify, and if something is off, iterate. Go tell the agent to go make corrections, right? And so we now have that kind of dance. That's the next step. And if we look at the why, the what, and the how, so the how is very much what we're doing here now. So where does Visual Studio fit into all this? Where we're looking at investing going forward in this kind of newer reality is, one thing is testing. We know that we do not have the world's best testing system in Visual Studio. Test Explorer hasn't been updated as fast as in other IDEs and whatnot. So it's one of the things that we want to invest in and make sure that we provide something that's modern, up-to-date, and super efficient. Diagnostics. So whether it's debugging or profiling, again, is an area that we might have the best debugger in the industry. At least that's what a lot of you tell us. And we want to keep it that way. But we also understand that the time you're debugging might look a little bit different than it used to, because it might be part of your verification step instead of just part of your inner loop as you're developing code. So it might be a little bit different, and so we have to react to that. Building and running. Again, that F5 or Control F5 in Visual Studio to build and run your app is something you're going to do more, proportionally speaking, to writing code. And so the faster we can make that F5 experience to build and run and get you to that state you're going to verify that the feature was working, the better it is, the more productive we can be. So how do we speed that up? How do we make that a better experience? And then integrations. Like, how does our system fits in with other systems in our company, in our organization, and so on? What are other integrations? Can we connect our Jira tickets directly into Visual Studio, or our GitHub actions, and all these different things that are part of building software? So both from a feature perspective, like what do you want to integrate with of other systems, but from a dev perspective as well. What other systems exist in your development process that would benefit from an integration? Reviewing, another activity that you're going to see go up probably, reviewing pull requests and whatnot. And so really, really strengthen that. We do have pretty good, it's getting better all the time, our Git integration, but it can be even better, of course. And so that's an area where we're going to invest in going forward. And finally, meaningful AI. We are pro developer tool. We are not for necessarily, we don't try to be like good for the students or whatever. We are a professional tool for C# and C++ developers. And that means that the AI that we put in Visual Studio is targeted the workloads that professional C# and C++ developers care about. And Nick's demo of the unit test profiler symbiosis there is a fantastic example of where AI comes in and fits into our workflow and creates something new that we couldn't do before without being noisy, without putting the prompt responsibility on us, right? Because that's not really very discoverable. I can't prompt for something I don't know how to prompt for. And so tying it all together with that type of meaningful AI is a key element. Here we are, March. We were the first Insiders. Insiders is the new preview. It used to be called Preview Edition of Visual Studio Preview version. We renamed it to Insiders. The Insiders came out in September of 2025, and we went GA in November with Visual Studio 2026. And since then, we've been dropping monthly updates. So every month, we drop a new version with new features in the stable channel. And at the same time, we drop a new version of the Insiders, which will be next month's stable. So the Insiders is always a month ahead. And so grab the Insiders if you want to be on the latest and greatest and test out new features. And we just had some cool new additions here this last week. We added agent skills and custom agents. So a lot of people were waiting for those things. So they're now in, which is really nice. And you're going to see all this coming along. The cool thing about the Insiders is we actually update it pretty much once a week. So with Preview, we just had one drop, and then you waited a month, and then there was an update. Now it's every week, Insiders is updated with new fixes, features, and tweaks. So we're like basically turning up the tempo. And when we move forward and we get to November, Visual Studio 2026, when you hit the update button in November, will change its name to 2027. It won't be a side-by-side install. Like you have today, you have 2022 and 2026 both installed. No, it's what we call an in-place update. It's literally just a name change. Visual Studio is now evergreen in that if you just update it, it changes its name every year, but it's the same Visual Studio. You don't have multiple versions. So that will happen going forward every November, aligned with the .NET release as well, which is also a November release. If you aren't Insiders, or just in general, up under Help, send feedback. If you run into issues, if you have feature ideas, use it. It goes straight to the team. And in Visual Studio 2026, when we launched this in November, and we look back the previous 12 months, we had fixed over 5,000 user-reported bugs and implemented over 300 user-requested features. So that's 23 bug fixes per workday and over 1 feature request implemented per workday, leading up to 2026. So this goes straight into the product teams. It is not going through any filter or anything like that. It goes straight into the same place when we open bugs internally. It comes into the same queries in ADO. The same team looks at it. Everything is being triaged the same way, no matter who suggested the feature or reported the bug. So keep that coming. And it's important because with Visual Studio, in the world of AI, where everything seems to be moving very, very fast, we know that pro developers still need their code, their debugger, their build tools, and be able to use their skills. And Visual Studio is going to be there all the way through this journey from wherever you are today and wherever the future might bring. Visual Studio will be along the way. So that is how we're looking into Visual Studio 2027 and way beyond. So with that, thank you very much.